The top business stories live from the Sky Newsroom. The US House of Representatives passes Donald Trump's tax megabill by a single vote after days of wrangling within the Republican Party. Long-term net migration falls by almost half in the last year. Plus, while the Chelsea Flower Show is the unlikely corporate event of the year. Very good afternoon. Welcome to Business Live with me, Darren McCaffrey. In the last couple of hours, the US House of Representatives has passed Donald Trump's showpiece tax bill by a single vote after days of wrangling between various factions of his Republican Party. The Republican-controlled House voted by 215 to 214 to approve the more than 1,000-page legislation which will slash taxes, reduce social spending and increase the federal debt. Let's speak to Gerard Lyons, Chief Economic Advisor at Net Wealth. Gerard, very good afternoon to you. This is significant because it is the absolute cornerstone of Donald Trump's agenda, and he only managed to just get it through.
Yeah, in fact, this covers the good and the unknown, shall we say, in terms of Donald Trump's agenda. The best way to think of Trump's economic policy is the good, the bad, and the uncertain. The good is the tax cuts, the regulatory changes. The financial markets in the States have been looking forward to these, hence they will be relieved that this bill has passed. The bad has been the tariff policy that we've seen in recent weeks. But the big unknown, the uncertainty, is the budget deficit, which is very sizable. So even though the markets are looking forward to the tax cuts and the impact that will have in terms of boosting the economy, the big underlying worry is that this will boost the budget deficit, which is already high, with increased national debt in the future. And that in turn will make the Fed, the central bank there, cautious about cutting rates too aggressively and will add to longer-term borrowing yields. So basically, President Trump had to get this through. This is the core of his economic policy. But in doing so, it leaves the market worrying about how he's going to finance this in the future.
Yeah, and that's the really interesting thing, is because some of the most strong objections to this have come from inside the Republican Party, concerned about US debts.
Yeah, well, American debt, it's almost like UK debt. It's just the overall level of debt is just below the size of the economy, below 100% of GDP. In terms of the US, President Trump's new policy will boost the overall level of debt, according to the independent Congressional Budget Office, to about 125% of GDP. So this is going to push debt levels up quite considerably. That adds to worries in his own party and indeed amongst many economists. So that explains why there was a lot of wrangling. One key aspect of this bill is to actually continue the tax cuts that President Trump implemented in his first term, but also part of the wrangling to get it through was also some spending cuts on the aid side in terms of Medicaid in the States. So that's added to worries. So it highlights the underlying tensions within the economy. When you step back, the issue about debt, whether it's in America or in Britain, is not only the level of debt, but the future outlook for growth and for interest rates. Because if you have a high level of debt and your future growth rate is low and the level of interest rates you're paying on that debt is high, then you start to fall into a debt trap. What President Trump is clearly hoping for is that the tax-cutting aspect of his package will start to boost US growth. If it does, and it's going to take some time to see this, then the markets will start to be relieved in the future. But for the moment, the markets are saying the debt level is high, the level of interest rates being paid on it is still high, and it's yet to be proven that the debt and the tax cuts associated with it will start to turn out to boost growth. So there's lots of uncertainty, and that it partly explains why there's a lot of political wrangling behind the scenes, as well as economists being worried about it.
Yeah, and there's massive implications for this. Particularly the renewable energy sector's got hard hit today in terms of share price, given the withdrawal of funding. But from the Democrats, they view an opportunity here, don't they? Because there are cuts to Medicare, if you like, and they think it'll hit, the kind of almost the MAGA votes hardest.
Yeah, look, there's really two aspects I think that are interesting based on what you've just said. One is the domestic politics in the States, because President Trump's approval rating is relatively low compared to presidents after just over 100 days being in power. And the economic backdrop is very uncertain, partly because of the impact of tariffs. The second aspect, which is quite a positive, maybe for us here in the UK, is that as the US pulls back from the green agenda, it presents a big opportunity for the financial sector here, the City of London, to really position itself as the global centre for green tech, etc. So President Trump is putting the US back in terms of green energy. That has lots of implications for the US economy. But in terms of the financial sector and the financial markets, one thing that people have been talking about in the city in the last few weeks and months is whether London can position itself to seize the opportunity here. Obviously, that depends on many other moving parts, it has to be said.
And just very, very quickly, if you can, we also got borrowing figures from the UK here today, and they're up.
Yeah, the UK borrowing figures were for April. They were much worse than expected. It was the fourth highest monthly borrowing figure for April. Revenues were higher because of increased taxes, but spending was up quite significantly, partly because of public sector pay increases. In fact, today's April figure encapsulates the underlying story of the UK debt picture, namely high tax, high spend, and high borrowing. So today's April figures are a poor backdrop. They've continued a recent trend of poor borrowing figures in the UK, and clearly they put pressure on the Chancellor and the government, because we have the comprehensive spending review in a few weeks' time. And then in the autumn, there's already, ahead of these figures, there was concerns about whether the Chancellor could make her self-imposed fiscal rules add up in the autumn. Figures like this, if they continue in the next few months, will really make it difficult for the Chancellor, and unfortunately will probably point to increased taxes in the autumn budget. But today it was increased revenues, partly because of higher taxes, outshone by increased spending and increased borrowing as well. So high taxes, high spending, high borrowing, and increased worries about the trend for the UK borrowing figures.
Gerard, great stuff as always. Thank you very much indeed, Gerard Lyons.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Now let's talk about migration, because long-term net migration is down by almost 50%, according to figures from the ONS today. The number of people immigrating minus the number of people leaving the country is estimated at 431,000 in the year ending to December 2024. That compared with some 860,000 in the year before. Let's speak to our political correspondent, Ali Fortescue, who joins us live from Westminster. And Ali, this is a significant drop, but the numbers still historically remain quite high.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're a long way from, you might remember the Conservatives, David Cameron, Theresa May, talking about bringing net migration down to the tens of thousands. We're still a long way from that. But look, the headline figure is a steep drop. As you say, 431,000. That's the provisional estimate for the year to December 2024, which is a lot less than the previous year. So, yes, the government will be hailing this as a win. It is the period, the first period of the Labour government that is covered for the very first time in these figures. But I think you've got to say that it is down to an extent to policy brought in by the Conservatives around, in particular, dependence for students and some workers at the end of their time in office. But of course, the Conservatives also presided over record net migration, more than 900,000 in 2023. So they have a difficult record to defend there when it comes to net migration. I don't need to tell you, Darren, that there is a lot of politics here. We know that. We know that there are questions around community cohesion. We know that there's been controversy around Keir Starmer's words when he talked about an island of strangers. We know that there are difficulties for businesses as well. I spoke today to a recycling plant near Coventry. He was telling me about the challenges he is facing with recruiting. He relies on people working for his business from abroad. And I haven't even mentioned illegal migration. That is a tiny fraction of the overall net migration figures, which is obviously mostly legal migration, people coming here to work and to study, but illegal migration, people crossing the channel in small boats. We do know that that figure so far for this year is at a record number. Those are separate numbers, but those are numbers too that this government will end up being judged by.
OK, Alec, great stuff. Thank you very much indeed with those net migration figures. Thank you. Now, the Chelsea Flower Show may be the best known for award-winning gardens. However, it has also recently become the corporate event of the year. Firms are flocking to Chelsea this week in the hopes of wooing clients. But how much of a benefit does corporate involvement actually bring? Speak to Andrew Fawkes, who's the Chief Executive of Hospitality at the Newt in Somerset, and they happen to be the chief hospitality sponsor of the Chelsea Flower Show. That is looking heaving behind you there. Clearly people have turned out, even on this cloudy Thursday. And Andrew, I suppose the first question is, when you are thinking about what to put your business's name to, what event to do it, what's your consideration? What do you take in to that consideration? Is it simply kind of value for money, if you like?
Good afternoon, Darren. As you can see, yes, Chelsea is bustling. First consideration really is the brand alignment and the partnership. For us, it was all about aligning ourselves with our values, which is all about the gardens at the Newton Somerset and also our sister property, Babelsturen, in Cape Town. So the gardens is always at the heart of everything we do. So that was the first alignment that we wanted to achieve with our sponsorship.
And what do you think you get out of it? What is the, you're clearly putting money into it. What are you hoping to achieve by sponsorships like this?
Well, it's 4 years in now, and over those 4 years, we built wonderful relationships with the RHS and many people that are aligned with it. But there's really the commercial focus, which is promoting our wonderful gardens and our wonderful garden membership, the hotel that we have down in Somerset, as well as our sister hotel at Babelsturen, which has, again, a wonderful garden. And also, as you can probably see, our lovely cider at Somerset, which is the heart of all ciders. There's ciders and then there's our cider, a premium luxury product that we're showcasing here for many to purchase and to enjoy.
And Andrew, the key point here is, isn't it, that actually, it is a flower show fundamentally, but by heck, it attracts a lot of important people. I mean, obviously you get the King and the Queen, as we saw earlier this week. But it's a big meeting place, isn't it, for business leaders, for people who work in the city, the great and good, if you like, of business life in this country, which is kind of slightly strange that it's happening at a flower show.
Well, we believe it's the opening of the year of the society. It really is. And we've had many of those business leaders networking here in our hospitality suite, serving them our wonderful rosé from Babelsturen in South Africa. And again, the specialness about that is it's the first of the season. Whilst we're in winter, they're harvesting in summer and making the best rosé there is around. So it's wonderful to share with all those business people.
And Andrew, just on terms of what you guys do on a day-to-day basis, a hotel, you've got a side of business and others. How is the business environment at the moment? I mean, particularly hospitality has found or had a difficult start to the year, and obviously there's been recent tax increases too.
Yes, that's true. The hospitality industry is struggling, but we have something unique at the Newton Somerset. We have the gardens, we have our experiences, and it's very personalised. So therefore, we do attract a wonderful set of guests, and actually, we are thriving right now. And it's because we also, have sponsorship with things like the Chelsea Flower Show and other great partnerships that allow to develop our guests.
OK, Andrew, really appreciate your time there live at the Chelsea Flower Show. As you say, that it seems to be bustling and buzzing this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
OK, you're watching Business Live here on Sky News. Coming up in a couple of minutes, we'll be looking at how world events are affecting the cinema industry and whether one of London's most iconic venues might actually be haunted. Won't miss that.
show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
I just took a shower above the clouds. You know why? Because this is the Emirates A380. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Very welcome back to Business Live. Mission Impossible, of course, is out this weekend, but it's been a tough few years, it must be said, for cinemas, with rising cost pressures and the threat, of course, of Donald Trump's tariffs hanging over the business. And one cinema that's been battling more than most is the Prince Charles Cinema in central London, that's also been in dispute with its landlord, while apparently having to deal with some rather ghostly goings-on. But its co-founder, Ben Friedman, told me that despite all that, things are going pretty well.
There has been a supply issue since COVID. And I think that's been caused by a couple of issues. One was the growth of streaming, which has meant that a certain type of film, there are films perhaps director-led or story-led with a decent-sized budget, have gone straight to streaming through people like Netflix and to a lesser extent Apple. And those films would have been in the cinema previously, but are no longer available. So if you look at the number of films that are released over the last 2 or 3 years, they're significantly down on the pre-COVID figures. I think the second issue is we obviously had the writers' strike, which didn't help as things were starting to get together. And that created a further delay. But I think fundamentally, what the industry has to get right is to have a more consistent supply of product so that you want to have a big movie at the minimum every other week and maybe 2 or 3 movies that people want to go and see every week in order to get people into the habit.
And this is kind of quite key for the British economy. I mean, we think of cinema as some people do for entertainment, which it clearly is, but it's been a big success story in Britain. Maybe not necessarily cinema attendances, but films being made here.
Yes, I mean, I think we have a huge amount of production talent here that has been recognized by filmmakers from all around the world. There's been a growth of film studios, helped by the tax benefits that the government gives to film production to encourage people to come here. And I think that is something when Trump talks about tariffs on foreign product.
Are you worried about that?
The confusing thing really is, what is the definition of a foreign film? If American finance, American stars, American talent come to the UK, does that make it a UK film or does it make it an American film? So I think the concern is going to be that, as with so many other things that have come from the White House, is clarity of policy. And then the industry will adapt. It always has adapted to whatever the best way of going forward is.
And just very finally, Ben, I hear you're renovating the cinema, and there might be some ghostly goings on, apparently.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes. I mean, we've always thought there might be a ghost at the cinema.
What is this? A ghost who serves you popcorn, or who spins the reel?
That's what we set to try and find out last week. I mean, we've had 3 incidences, very unusual incidents of flooding, and once the water was turned off, which have sort of coincided with our landlord doing building works above us. So we started to investigate. We thought perhaps that the ghost may have been upset by the banging and the building work and have been pushed out of things. So last Wednesday, we invited a paranormal expert into the cinema to investigate. And we were able to find not just one ghostly sense, but actually I think there were 4 or 5. The good news is they don't seem upset with us.
Maybe they're upset with your landlords.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's what we will find out. And that's why we're continuing to investigate. But it was reassuring. I mean, we've had several members of staff who've had experiences that they couldn't quite explain. And they're reassured that now they understand why.
That was Ben Friedman there. Make what you will of the ghostly goings-on, apparently, at the cinema in central London. That is it from me on Business Live for this afternoon. We're back, of course, at 11:30 tomorrow morning. Do join me then if you can. Up next, it is the News Hour with Mark Austin, including live coverage of a press conference that we're expecting from the Mayor of Washington, D.C., following that tragic shooting of a young couple who worked at the Israeli embassy in Washington, who were shot dead as they left an event at a Jewish museum. As I say, we're expecting to hear from the Mayor of DC in the next couple of minutes. That and the rest of the day's news with Mark Austin next. And I'll see you tomorrow morning. Goodbye.